Well, good evening. Hope y'all are doing well. My name is Charles. I'm pastor here at Wright's Chapel United Methodist Church. If you've been tuning into our Facebook page or that in the last few weeks, you know that one night a week we've been having some kind of entertainment or so. Clay has been, our music director has been playing music and singing and taking requests, and that we thought we'd give Clay a week off, and we thought we'd try something new this evening and let me tell a story instead. And I'm going to share a story tonight. And so I want to invite you before we get started, go ahead and check in and let us know that you're with us. And if you see someone else who has tuned in, go ahead and say hi and speak to them and greet one another. And I don't know whether we'll continue this or not. We'll see how it goes tonight. But if you're there and you're familiar with the Bullet Hole Road stories and you have a favorite story that you remember that you might want to hear again, go ahead and share that and just make a comment about what you remember about that story, and we'll see about whether we do that, whether we do it again or not. So if you were here hoping to hear Clay sing night, hang in there. Just hang in with us this evening. Clay, I'm pretty sure is gonna play again, and I say how much I appreciate y'all tuning in. I'm sure so many of you, right? So many of you had probably so many other things that you could be doing tonight. All of us, right? We've all got all these different engagements that we could have been doing tonight. Dinner engagements and parties to go to, and social occasions, fun things, and yet you've chosen to tune in and to listen to me ramble on about my cousin Teresa. I feel honored. For me, at my house this evening, it was either a choice of come and do this or sit and watch a PBS documentary with my wife Amy on the Roosevelts. And some of you are kind of like probably thinking right now, PBS. That doesn't sound like a bad option. For those of you who are choosing to stay tuned in and listen, let me just say there's nothing a preacher likes better than a group of folks who got nothing better to do than to listen to them ramble on. For those of you who are perhaps with us tonight and maybe you're new to this, let me fill you on what we're doing. I have been telling stories for quite a long time now. My wife will tell you that I tell a lot of stories. But I've got a group of stories that I tell based upon some news snippets I get from my cousin Teresa and about life in her hometown. And most of those little news snippets I turn into sermons that I call sermons from the Bullet Hole Road. But sometimes the news from my cousin Teresa, sometimes the news she shares, there's no sermon in it. It's just news and maybe some practical advice. And that's more of tonight's story, just some news and maybe some practical advice for all of us. For those of you who are unfamiliar with my whole relationship with my cousin Teresa and that, my cousin Teresa and we kind of grew up together, and she lived with my family for a while. She's older than I am. She lived with us during a period of time when I was like junior high school, and my mom, who went back to college later, Mom and Teresa were in college together, and she lived at the house with us. And my cousin Teresa, she still lives up in the Catskill Mountains of New York. She actually lives just over the mountain still from the small town that I grew up in Delhi, New York. She lives just over the mountain in the very small town of Andes, New York, and she lives there with her husband John, and they have a little dog named Bailey, and she and her husband John, they have two girls, Jenny and Jessica, and they all live just outside of town on what is actually Bullet Hole Road. And people have asked me, is there really Bullet? Yes, there is really. They live on Bullet Hole Road just outside of Andes. And I've been talking with Teresa a little bit more recently, since everyone is cooped up like everyone. She and John have got nothing to do and nowhere to go, and so she's been calling a bit more, even up in Andes, as small and as isolated as it is. Things are shut down even there in Andes, Teresa said. And There was some debate early on about whether this whole social distancing thing even really needed to take place in Andes, since most of the people who live in Andes live there and stay there because they want to be socially distant from people to begin with. Even those who have lived there all their life, they know it's best to keep some distance. And if you've lived there long enough, the longtime folks in Andes, they particularly know who you should keep your distance from, and in most cases they're related to them. Ralph Stetson, who has lived next to his brother there. Ralph I've known for years, lived next to his brother for nearly 40 years. They haven't been within 6 feet of each other since Daryl and Ralph won $50 in the horseshoe throwing contest at the Firemen's Parade back in 1982. And Ralph claims that he never got his share of that $50 prize. $25 is all it would take, but no one is budging. And so Daryl and Ralph, they just keep their distance. Of course, for the school kids in Andes, there wasn't much they could do, actually. When the governor closed all the schools, well, Governor Cuomo, he probably didn't have really Andes in the forefront of his mind when he made that decision. For the students of Andes, that seemed a little bit extreme for them, since there isn't a class in the whole of the Andes school. In kindergarten through 12th grade, there's not a class that with more than 7 kids in it. Local folks there in Andes, they're still debating about a high school graduation ceremony. There's really only 6 kids in the graduating class, Teresa said. Buck Johnson's grandson is one of them, and so Buck offered up his barn to be used for the graduation ceremony. More than enough room. Bessie loves a good party, said Buck. Since Buck's niece had a birthday party down at the farm in the fall, Bessie, she'd been producing more milk than she ever had before. Buck even offered, Teresa said, to make a full stage in the barn out of hay bales there in the barn. But Trudy Barlow, who is family been in Andes for years, their daughter is the class valedictorian. The mother was afraid that Trudy's allergies would fire up with all the hay and that her eyes would swell up and that she wouldn't be able to give her valedictorian speech. So everything's kind of on hold for the time being. Well, here at our house here in Virginia, over in Lake Landor, we had some flurries at our house yesterday morning. Flurries were in the air, I'm told, and you talk about putting the stores in a bind, trying to keep their shelves stocked. You combine a pandemic and a snowstorm here in Virginia, and you got trouble. Of course, when you talk to my people up home where I grew up, they laugh. They laugh at us and how we react to the little bit of snow we get down here and how it causes us to scramble like we do. But even I now, who grew up in the Catskill Mountains of New York, where snow is your constant companion from October all the way through the beginning of May. Even I, after 33 years of living there, living down here, I've gotten acclimated down here to know that at the first sign of snow, you need to run to the store. My cousin Teresa, she called me yesterday to wish me a happy birthday, and I told her about the snow flurries that we had yesterday morning, and that was really the first snow of the season. And Teresa, she was count yourself lucky, she said. There's still snow on the ground up here, she said. Had a big snowstorm up in Andes that dropped about 8 inches 2 weeks ago, she said. Been cold up there as well, so the snow's not going anywhere. 23 degrees the other morning, she said, when John went out to put wood into the furnace, the wood furnace they have out, the furnace out there in the garage. And when the sun finally began to shine, Teresa was saying the temperature got to a balmy 35 for a high that day. March and April is just so hard in Andes. And when my cousin Teresa says that, I'm telling you, she's not lying. I remember what it was like. You get through the hell of February where it doesn't get above 0, and you're just waiting and you're praying for warmer weather. And I say February is like hell. And it's like hell because it's so cold that it will burn you. And then by the end of March, right, you start to feel like the days are getting warmer, and you'll get to the upper 30s, and sometimes you'll get to the low 40s, and you're thinking the winter is about over, and you're getting out your shorts, and you're starting to get out your summer t-shirts, and you're pulling the sandals from out of the back of the closet, and some folks, they're trying on their bathing suits, and then you get hit with another snowstorm. I'm telling you, it can crush your spirits. It's just awful. It's the time of year that you just have to endure through. And of all the years, this year you've got nothing to help you. Like normally in Andes, even those folks who don't know anything about baseball, those folks who don't even like baseball, you'll find them each day, each afternoon, tuning into spring training games down in Florida, just so they can see the grass, just so they can see the sunshine a little bit. Getting through March and April in Andes is like a runner who has hit the wall. And you think you're going to die, and the only way to make it is to just keep plodding along, and you just hope that you'll get another burst. But some don't make it. Some don't make it, Teresa said. You can see it in their eyes. The desperation drives them crazy. This year, you combine the isolation and then the snow, said Teresa, and it can cause the most sober among us to want to drink. I'm telling you, friends, I can remember. We scramble around down here like chickens when a few snowflakes fly in the air, and those up north, they'll laugh at us and they'll make fun of us and they call us soft. But I'm telling you, in Andes, the snow and how long it lasts, it can drive you insane. Ruth Connor is actually going to her first AA meeting tonight down at the Andes Presbyterian Church, and Ruth, I'm telling you, she's never had a drink in her life, never. But Ruth, she feels like she has to go. Her friend Bruce, Ruth's friend Bruce, kind of invited her in sort of an offhanded way, and she felt like she couldn't say no, and that she doesn't have much of a choice. They've had an AA meeting. They've had an AA meeting group down there at the Andes Presbyterian Church for years now. It's a small group, 5-6 people at the most. Been the same people for years. They're small but faithful. Hard to be anonymous in Andes, and everyone knows who goes to the meeting. But the group is real good about keeping whatever is said in the group, it stays in the group. Oh, a few of the fellows down at Bert's garage, they will often dig for some gossip from Bruce from time to time. And normally Bruce, I've known him for years, he just kind of runs off at the mouth, but not when it comes to his Thursday night group. Bruce, he is tight-lipped about those conversations. And Ruth Connor, well, she's counting on those tight lips tonight. And not just from Bruce. She should be in that meeting right about now. Like I said, Ruth, she's never had a drink in her life, but she feels like she has to go down to the church AA meeting tonight and is hoping that she'll never have to go again. Teresa was telling me about 2 weeks ago, they had another snowstorm early in the morning, about 4:30, 3 o'clock, 4:30 in the morning or so. It came down, 8 inches, came down in buckets. It came down snow mixed with ice. It was a cruel April Fool's Day storm. Thankfully, Ruth was scheduled to be off, but because the storm hit so early in the morning, the hospital had called Lorraine. Lorraine is Ruth's sister, and they had asked if Lorraine could come into work early and work a double, and they would pay her time and a half for the whole time. And Lorraine, Ruth's sister, she's a nurse. She's a nurse over at the hospital in Oneonta, and Lorraine, she didn't want to pass up that kind of money. And so Lorraine asked if she could drop off her girls at Ruth's house before she went to work. Hope and April are Lorraine's daughters. They are 10 and 12 years of age. They have stayed by themselves before, but with Lorraine working a double shift, she just felt better if she could leave them with Ruth. And Ruth was fine with that, and so at 5:45 a.m., Lorraine dropped those two girls off at her sister Ruth's house down on Cooncat Creek. And Ruth has watched those girls grow up, and she thinks the world of them. She worries about them, of course. She worries about the shape their life is taking. She oftentimes doesn't think that their mother spends the time with them that she should. And so Ruth, she is always happy when she gets an opportunity. She's always happy to spend some time with her nieces and to try and help mold them into fine young women. Well, April and Hope, when they got to Ruth's house, they just basically, they were tired, preteens, but tired, and they just basically wanted to watch TV. And so that's what they did, one show after another. And Hope, she had brought a video game, and so they hooked up their video game to the TV, and they began to play their video game with each other. And they were very content. They were relatively quiet. But Ruth had been recently reading an article about all of this isolation that we're in, and the dangers for children, and the dangers of children having too much screen time and watching too much TV. And Ruth decided enough was enough. I'm telling you, friends, I'm telling you, isolation combined with snow, it will cause you to do things. And Ruth, she went and she pulled the plug on the TV. And she said, we're not going to spend all day watching this stupid TV. We don't get a chance to spend that much time together. Girls, let's play a game, or let's talk, or let's do something. And Ruth thought, she said, hey, let's do this. She said, let's go outside and make a snowman and decorate him. She said, I got a text yesterday from Randy Whitaker from the Andes Presbyterian Church, Ruth said, and he was saying that with the snow coming, that he was doing the Snowman Challenge. And he said to let him know that if you made a snowman at your house, and that he would drive around later with his brother Bruce sometime, and they would take a picture. And then the next day that they would post the pictures of the winning snowmen online, and then he and his brother Bruce would judge, and they would send out a $50 gift card prize for the best decorated snowman. Well, April and Hope, they were agitated by it all. It sounded childish to them. They really didn't want to get dressed. They didn't want to go outside. They just wanted to watch TV. But Aunt Ruth, she was insistent. And so they went along and they got dressed and they went outside with their aunt, and they began to build a snowman out by the road so that Randy would be sure to see it. They actually ended up having a great time. And they tried to decorate their snowman to actually look like Randy Whitaker, because Hope was sure that would help them win the prize. And when they had done them all up and he looked real good, they went back inside and they had some hot cocoa. And Hope asked her Aunt Ruth, she said, can you give me Randy's cell phone number? And she got the number and she texted Randy and she told him that they had made the snowman to make sure that he would come by and get a picture. And Hope was so sure that they were going to win the $50. Ruth said to her nieces, she said, now that was fun, wasn't it? That was fun. That was a good time. We weren't even watching a screen. You weren't playing games. That was just fun. We had a good time together. She said, how about we play some cards or maybe play a game? And so they played a couple of hands of rummy, and then they played some Scrabble. But by then, the girls just wanted to go back to watching TV and playing their video games. And so who knows? Ruth would tell you today, I don't know what possessed me to say it. Probably snow in April. I'm telling you, snow in April, friends, it will make you go insane. But But Ruth said to those two girls, she said, hey girls, when I was a kid and school was off, your mother Lorraine and I, we used to play a game called Truth or Dare. Have you ever played Truth or Dare? Oh, Lord have mercy, friends. Have you ever played Truth or Dare? Oh, it's a wonderfully dangerous game. And so the three of them, Hope, April, and Aunt Ruth, they began to play the game Truth or Dare. And the girls, who are pretty inquisitive, started asking their Aunt Ruth about their mother Lorraine. And Ruth, she started getting nervous, and she started getting a little worried about some of the truths that she was having to reveal. And so heavens knows what possessed her. But Ruth said to those two girls, I'll take a dare. I tell you, friends, the longer that we are quarantined and the longer we are ordered to stay at home, the longer this goes on. Don't talk to your children. Don't play games. Don't get into conversations. I'm telling you, just let them watch TV. Let them play video games. For God's sakes, don't ever play Truth or Dare. April came up with it. I dare you, April said to her Aunt Ruth. I dare you to run out to the end of the driveway and put up the flag on the mailbox naked. It was almost like April was too embarrassed to even say it. And the two girls kind of giggled at each other and they laughed. And Hope looked at her sister and she said, "You're crazy." But those two girls, they stopped laughing when Aunt Ruth stood up. And she walked to the window and she looked at the thermometer hanging outside her big bay window, 37 degrees. Ruth then began to calculate and measure the distance with her eye. 50 yards out, 50 yards back. And then she walked into the bathroom. And she came back out into the living room where those two young, impressionable girls were with a flannel bathrobe on. The girls were shocked. No, Aunt Ruth, you don't have to do it, Aunt Ruth. I was just kidding, said April. Don't do it. We'll come up with something else. How about 25 jumping jacks, said Hope. Just do jumping jacks. How about rub your belly and pat your tummy? Can you do that, said April. No, said Ruth, I keep my word. Remember, girls, you're only as good as your word. And Ruth, she opened the front door to her home there on Cooncat Creek. And she dropped that bathrobe. And she started running as fast as she could, lifting her feet up through the snow piles, running as fast as she could, naked out to the mailbox. It was 37 degrees outside. The wind was blowing, the snow was falling, it was blowing, the air was bitter cold. Ruth got to the mailbox and she quickly reached for the flag to pull up the flag of the mailbox. The mailbox flag, it was frozen. Ice was piled up around it. Ruth grabbed hold of the post of the mailbox with her bare, numb hands, and she began to shake the post, and then she banged upon the mailbox, and she pulled with two hands, and up came the red flag. Ruth, she turned and she headed back, running towards the house, trying as hard as she could to place her feet in the same tracks she had already made. And then she heard it. An unimaginable sound. she heard a sound that Ruth had not thought of when she told those two impressionable girls, "You're only as good as your word." It was the sound of a truck slowly coming around the curve. There was a truck driving down Coon Cat Creek. Now, in any given week, friends, there may be 5 cars that drive on Coon Cat Creek and pass by Ruth's house in a week's time, but Ruth, she heard it. What in God's name is happening? Her mind in a panic. And that truck, it was coming. And it sounded so loud, and the tires were churning up the snow, slowly coming around the bend. It was about to pass right in front of Ruth's driveway. And what seemed like an eternity, Ruth looked at the snowbank to her right. And her mind thought, dive. But her body, it wouldn't move. And her mind thought, hands, cover. But her hands wouldn't move either. Ruth looked back towards the house, and she saw the girls in the window, and they weren't laughing. They were pointing towards her, and they were pointing towards the big truck at the end of the driveway, and they were just standing there with their mouths hanging wide open. Ruth Connor turned her head just enough to see that truck now in full view of the driveway, and it was like her body did the only thing it could do. She froze. Ruth Connor, she froze. She stood frozen, standing there right next to the snowman that she and her 2 nieces had worked on so hard this morning. She stood frozen next to Randy Whitaker, the snowman. Ruth, she stood frozen there for what seemed like hours. And it's as if that truck was taking its own sweet time, like they were on a slow-moving tour of Coon Cat Creek. Tourists taking pictures from the truck, which they were. Bruce and Randy Whitaker had gotten Hope's text earlier in the morning telling them about the snowman that they had made, and now they were riding by Ruth's house to take a picture. By the time the truck had passed and Ruth had gotten inside, the girls were crying. They had been laughing so hard. And Ruth, she too was crying. Not laughing, mind you, just crying, begging and asking her nieces, "Did you see who it was? Were they looking this way?" she asked. And the girls, they had no idea who was in the truck. The truck was dirty. All they had seen was the truck. It looked like maybe a couple of people inside. I'm sure they didn't see anything, Hope said, trying to comfort and calm Ruth down. Needless to say, the 2 girls watched TV the rest of the afternoon and into the evening. If you ever want to come here again, Ruth told those girls, you do not tell your mother any of this. It is our secret and ours only. Do you understand me? April and Hope, they promised, and they promised again, and then they promised one more time. And yet they each left with $25 in their pocket that they had not had when they came there that morning. Ruth, she tried to put the whole nightmare out of her head. That whole afternoon, just tried to erase it from her mind. And she finally calmed down until later that night when she was scrolling through Facebook and she saw a post by Randy Whitaker who was explaining that he and his brother Bruce had driven around the area and that he would be posting pictures in the morning of the winning snowmen and snow women. Randy had written from the snowman building contest. Everyone did a great job, Randy wrote. Some of you were so very creative, Randy posted. Again, Ruth, she didn't know what to do. Should she call Randy? Should she call and beg Randy? But if she did call him, then he would surely know. Maybe it had been too dark. Maybe they hadn't seen anything. And Ruth, she went to bed uncertain of what to do, frozen in her thoughts almost, although she seemed hot all over. Poor Ruth, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about those pictures, how stupid she had been, and what had possessed her to do such a thing. The next morning, Randy posted pictures, just as he had said he would, of the winning snowmen and snow women. The Johnson kids got first, and they would get the $50. Marge Thompson's grandchildren came in second. The Olsen twins were awarded third prize, and then Randy simply thanked everyone for having participated. Ruth, she was so relieved. She breathed in a deep breath and tried to put the nightmare out of her mind. But it was later that afternoon when she went to pick up her mail from the mailbox that she found in her mailbox, there was a card from Bruce, Randy's brother. She opened the envelope, and there inside was a picture, a photograph, a little blurry, but it looked like two snowmen side by side. The one snowman all shapely, round, firm, and tall. The other looked like it had melted maybe a little bit, like it had gotten a little too warm and was starting to sag and drip in certain parts. And Bruce, he had written a quick note on the card next to the picture. A note that simply said, you might want to cover that snow woman's cheeks. Poor thing looks like she might have gotten frostbite, and that's no fun. And then Bruce wrote on the other side of the card, Ruth, this snow and isolation is tough on all of us. You don't hesitate to call me if you need to talk. Or if you need to, you can join me at AA on Thursday nights. Your secret's safe with us. So Ruth she's headed to AA tonight down at the Andes Presbyterian Church. Because what's said in that group stays in that group. And right now, Ruth Connor is thinking this is her best chance at damage control. Of course, Ruth's mom is worried, as is the rain. They invited her over for dinner tonight, but she told them she was going to the church meeting. They've pushed Hope and April for information and for answers. They've questioned the two girls if perhaps they found anything unusual, maybe some liquor in a stash when they were at their aunt's Ruth's house the other day. But $25 in Andes can take you a long way. And April and Hope, they're not talking. I guess I share all this with you friends, not in order to preach, but rather simply just as a warning. Especially if this isolation lasts a whole lot longer. Or if, God forbid, we happen to get an April storm. I grew up in it, and I know that winter can be tough. And so my advice is just let the kids watch TV. Put in a video, let them play a video game, watch a movie. Plan to talk to your kids later this summer. Otherwise, it's just too risky. And so that's the news from down Bullet Hole Road and the Andes Presbyterian Church. I'm planning on letting Clay do the entertainment next week. And so I wish you well. I wish you peace. And that you have a great night.